We've been learning this Gemara about numerous topics. Actually, we've covered laws of interrupting Shema with the amount of time it takes to say the entire Shema, and we discussed that law. We spoke about a law of walking while reciting the Shema, and then ending up walking through in an area that's dirty, mevuos hamatunafos, and we spoke about that law and different two opinions. We basically had an argument between Rav Huna and Rav Chizda. These two, the two opinions that our Gemara is really dealing with. It's interesting if you look on the bottom Tosfos on page 24b. Tosfos over there says that Rabbeinu Hananel paskins like Rav Chizda, and even though Rav Chizda was a student of Rav Huna, so even though he's a student, Rabbeinu Hananel paskins like Rav Chizda, and he says l'chumra azlinan, we go l'chumra, we're machmir. So Rav Chizda is more machmir, is more strict, and Rabbeinu Hananel paskins like Rav Chizda, even though he's Rav Huna's student. And Rav Alfis, he says, paskins like Rav Huna, and he brings a proof because of a question the Gemara has in Yuma. So it's an argument who to paskin like. Who is the halacha? Who's the final halacha? Like all the commentaries, are dealing. All the halachic books are dealing with this debate, because even in the Rishonim, meaning the commentaries on the Gemara, the earlier commentaries on the Gemara, they seem to argue. Rabbeinu Hananel and the Rif are both two of the major pillars of halacha, and they themselves they disagree on who the halacha should be like. So this is what we're going to be learning about, a number of arguments between Rav Chizda and Rav Huna, and so we're going to go further, and we'll see a few more of these arguments. Okay, so we have this argument here about walking while reciting Shema and walking into a mevuos hamatunafos, something dirty area. You put your hand over your mouth, and we said there's two opinions what that means. Either it shouldn't look like you're saying, like you're reciting the Shema in that dirty area, or you're even allowed to say it out loud, which means that everyone knows you're saying Shema. The issue is you need some type of a separation, and it would seem to me that the reason for that separation has something to do with what we learned, that your mouth should be that the mouth is one of the organs of the breathing, that it should be there should be a separation, because that's one of the mouths, that's one of the organs that's supposed to be praising Hashem, and your praise should be separated. I guess not because of the organ, probably just because simply the praise. This is the praise of Hashem, so it should be separated between the dirt. The commentary doesn't exactly clarify what the specific law of separation is. In other words, the hand is being used here as a machitza, as a separation. Your hand is being used as a separation. Anyway, so this is the two opinions. And then we brought sukkim about how bad it is to recite Shema in a place that's dirty, and then we brought a pasuk: if a person stops saying the Shema, he will have arichas yamim. But then again, that was Rabbi Avahu, who was of the opinion that you're supposed to stop. Rabbi Yochanan argued and Rabbi Yochanan said that you could continue reciting the Shema. And we brought the logic behind it as well. We spoke about how it's all about being in a pure location, being in a place that's machanecha kodesh, a place that's holy. And when you're walking, it's not really a problem of going through, according to Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, which is Rav Huna's opinion, it's not a problem going through a place that's unholy because that's not considered your machane, your camp. Your camp has to be pure. In other words, when you're reciting the Shema, where you are should be holy. And this is not considered your area just because you're walking through. You're going to be out of there in a moment. It's not really considered your area. And then the Gemara continued, and we spoke about having a talus, like a garment, covering you from bottom, from your waist down. And we mentioned that Rav Huna says that it's mutter to say Kriya Shema. We had a brisa that said that if you have some type of a cloak on you from your waist, from your hip down, it's over your hip, it's mutter to recite Shema. And then we turned the page, we are on page 25a, and we said that, but that doesn't work for tefillah, because tefillah, you need to cover your heart. And that's also an interesting law. To what extent does one need to cover themselves for tefillah? Is this an obligation to cover one's entire body, or is there a special law that the heart has to be covered? Is this something special about one's heart that it needs to be covered? And
Rabbi, if I could interrupt, when you say heart, are you talking about the physical heart or where the tefillin is wrapped around your arm?
No. The physical heart, even though it has skin, you have your body covering your heart, but that area of the skin of the body that is by the heart, it needs to be covered. That's the Gemara's statement. The question is, so what does that mean? So the Gemara explains, Rashi explains that because it's like you're standing before the king. That's the way Rashi explains it, that it's like you're standing before the king, and you should stand with fear. And so the heart needs to be covered. But according to that logic, if you're standing before the king, it would seem that your whole body should be covered. And this is the question the Bach brings in Shulchan Aruch. The Bach asks this question in the Shulchan Aruch, that from Rashi's logic, in other words, the Gemara doesn't say clearly what the reason is. Why tefillah? Why does prayer need more than Shema? Shema is enough to cover from your hip down. This is obviously not the preferable way to say Shema, is to be topless. But it's in this scenario, it says that you for whatever reason you're stuck. So you are allowed to say Shema. However, Shemona Esrei you shouldn't say because your heart is not covered. And what's interesting is what happens if a person did say Shemona Esrei with just a towel around them, around their waist, around their hip down. What would be the din? So the Rambam says that this law is only lechatchila. It's only preferable. B'di'evet, if a person davens Shemona Esrei that way, if he already davened, he is yotzei. He has fulfilled his obligation. Now the Biur Halacha then brings an interesting point, and he says, so what should you do if the time is, you're stuck, and it's the time is running out? B'di'evet, if you davened, you fulfilled your obligation, right? So should you just daven now? Now you have no choice really, because the time is going to be up for davening. So should you daven or not? So preferably you're not supposed to daven this way. If you davened already, you fulfilled your obligation. What do you do in this scenario? So the Bir Halacha says that better don't daven at all. It's better not to daven than to daven like this. But the final thing is that you're supposed to cover your heart. And that Rashi explains the reason is because you're standing before a king. And the Bach asks, well, then if you're standing before a king, then really your whole body should be covered. And the Bach explains that really you have to cover your whole body. Since we were talking about Shema, and there was a thought that maybe your heart should be covered, and the answer was no. Therefore, it just continues. It says that for Shemona Esrei, you would need to cover your heart, but really it means you have to cover even more than your heart, according to this. In other words, Shema, you don't even have to cover your heart. Shemona Esrei, you do. You have to cover more than your heart. But Talmidei Rabbeinu Yoina explains differently. He says the heart is the most honorable organ. And therefore, it is fitting that it should be covered at the time of davening. And what comes out from that is that it's only the heart needs to be covered and not the other limbs. In other words, obviously, from the din of tznius, anything that's normally covered, the tradition, if the common minhag is to cover it, then it would need to be covered. But with regard to the law, the specific law of tefillah, of davening, and fulfilling your obligation to daven, or in a case where people walk around like this normally, so all you would need to do is cover your heart. Like, some places people walk around without shoes. So in those places, that wouldn't be the place men walked around without shirts. That would be theoretically not an issue of tznius, but it is an issue of davening you have to cover your heart, because the heart is considered the most honorable limb, which is a very interesting statement. The Talmidei Rabbeinu Yoina mentions this very interesting statement. I guess it emphasizes how important it is, our feelings, our emotions, our love for Hashem, all the mitzvahs that are connected to the heart. I guess that's it's considered I guess it's obvious that it's considered the most honorable limb. Okay, so then the Gemara said, so that's the regarding covering.
Rabbi, one more
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
You said that when you do the Shemona Esrei, that the heart must be covered. And if it's the most honorable organ, why are you covering it? I don't understand that.
So we're really talking about a scenario that's not so practical. This is all theoretical. This is not practical at all. And the reason why it's not practical is because most people we know, and most countries that we ever are in contact with, people dress with clothing, and they don't fall into situations where they don't have any clothing. This is not it's a more of a theoretical law.
Oh,
and,
okay. Now I get it.
But still, the idea is that the heart should be, being an important organ, it should be covered properly.
Okay. All right.
And that's the idea, sort of like an respect.
Okay. Now that makes it more clear. Thank you.
Okay. And then the next Gemara said that if a person by mistake entered a bathroom with their tefillin on, what should they do? And it mentioned also issues that if a person stops in the middle of urinating or defecating, it could be dangerous, and therefore he's allowed to finish, what he's specifically what he's doing at that moment, and then he should go and remove the tefillin, and then can go back to the bathroom. So that was a health matter that it mentions, and a halachic matter someone wearing tefillin. And then the Gemara mentioned that if a person has dirt on their flesh, or their hand is inside a bathroom, so would they be allowed to recite Shema? And again, I don't know how practical this halacha is. We hope it's not so practical, but there's no water to wash it, there's nothing to wipe it on, so it does seem a little surprising. But because again, we live in we live with plumbing and all that, and why is a person's hand in the bathroom? Can't they just pull it out? Like what exactly, what is his hand doing in the bathroom when he's saying the Shema? Now, I should mention that we're dealing with a case where there is a separation between the bathroom and the person. Because otherwise he would need to separate 4 amos, 4 cubits before the bathroom, away from the bathroom to say Shema. So we're talking about that his hand is going through some type of a hole in the bathroom. He stuck it in, and he's saying Shema. And the question is, would he be allowed to recite Shema with his hand in a bathroom? Again, the bathroom would not be appropriate to say the Shema, but here it's not, his body is not there, just one organ of his body. And the same thing applies with this soya al-basari, that there's some excrement on his flesh, but it's obviously we're talking about that it's covered over. And I mentioned there's many different opinions exactly how to learn this Gemara, because it is a little surprising that it's permitting, that Rav Huna permits this. And the Gemara does, the halacha part of this Gemara says that there's 2 opinions, Rav Huna and Rav Chizda. Again, it's the same Rav Huna and Rav Chizda, that Rav Huna is going to be lenient. And he says the most important organs that we have to be careful, that have to be in a pure and clean state, are the kol haneshama, all the organs that have to deal with breathing and praising Hashem. So it's the mouth and the nose. These are the important organs that cannot have any dirt on them. But any other organ, it's not a problem. So if a person's nose was in a bathroom, I don't know how that could be, that would be a problem. But if their arm is in the bathroom, according to Rav Huna, it's not a problem. Now, Rav Chizda argues, he says, all of your organs are supposed to serve Hashem. In fact, that's one of the reasons why people shuckle, they shake when they daven, is from this verse. All of my limbs, taimarna, speak praise of you, Hashem. So from that verse, our Gemara is learning that all your organs, all your limbs, all your bones, I should say, really, all your bones have to be clean. And that is Rav Chizda's opinion, that even if your arm or your toe, for that matter, was inside a bathroom, you should not be reciting Shema, because every single limb should be reciting should be involved in clean, so to speak, clean in order to recite Shema. So those are the 2 opinions, either Kol Haneshama, either from the verse of Kol Haneshama, or Kol Atzmaisai Teimarna. That would be the source of either your whole body has to be clean outside of a bathroom, or only your neshama, only your nose and your mouth would be included in that.
Rabbi, did you ask the question about Kol Atzmotai?
No, I haven't. I have my friend Rabbi Biton, is the Sephardic rabbi of the Magen David. So I'm gonna have to ask him about the pronunciation. Thank you for bringing it up, and now you reminded me again. So hopefully it won't slip my mind. But just for your honor, I should correct myself while we're in the class until Kal it's my side Taimarna Hashem Yichamecha. Okay. Now the next Gemara.
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that how would it be that a person's hand is in the bathroom? You said he just pull it out. Maybe he's changing the diaper and he's holding on to the baby and changing the diaper with his hands, but his body's outside the bathroom because he's trying to say Shema.
And the time of Shema is right there, right then, and he needs to change the bathroom to the baby, because otherwise he won't be able to say Shema, because he'll have dirt and a smell near him. And so, right, so he's doing it from afar, from, interesting, right? So I guess that could be, I mean, I don't know, he might get sued for child abuse or whatever, but, trying to change a diaper from behind the door or whatever, sticking. But the example given in the Shulchan Aruch is that there's a hole in the bathroom and he has his hand in the bathroom. So it's like his baby is in the bathroom and he's outside. I don't know. It sounds a little strange, but maybe it does have something to do with the fact that, maybe that they lived in such small quarters that they hardly, like, the Gemara talks about cases of a sukkah, that their table couldn't even fit in the sukkah. And the Mishnah talks about, do you fulfill the obligation of sukkah? Like, although it sounds like they used to have these tiny huts, tiny situations, nowadays, if you don't have a huge sukkah, it's like, you're like embarrassed. But in those days, like, they had maybe a tiny little.
For a meal. And,
sounds like someone's wants to share their conversation over here.
Phyllis is talking.
Let me just mute her. Okay, so it's good. We have a whole system here. Some people can tell who it is.
Yeah, right.
And some computers, are really, we got the whole system where we got our whole program.
We're in sync. We're in sync.
We're in
That's
sync.
it.
So so maybe they had like such a small house, they hardly had a place to sit down, so their foot might be in the bathroom. There's a hole. They're the only place to put their hand. It's like more comfortable. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's more comfortable to put their hand on this hole through into the bathroom. So it's like an armrest. Maybe that would be I think that's a better scenario. They have like an armrest.
I have a question.
Yes.
But it's related to, what is the difference between something that's halacha and a barata and a barita?
Brisa.
Brisa. Brisa?
Yeah, Brisa is like a Mishnah.
Yay.
I'm not sure what you just said, but a Brisa is a similar to a Mishnah, and it's a statement.
That's an opinion. It's not.
It's a statement from the rabbis who wrote the Mishnahs. It
But
wasn't
it's not
edited. It wasn't edited as much as the Mishnahs were, and it's called a brisa. It is
Okay.
something that we take into consideration when we try to figure out halacha. We often bring brisas and we bring Mishnahs and we bring other statements, and we
Okay.
try to it's used to clarify the halacha and the meaning of the Mishnah sometimes as
Right.
well.
Can we call a brisa an opinion?
I don't know if you call it an opinion. You'd call it an
analysis?
What we're supposed to follow is halasha, correct?
Yes, we follow the final halacha, but that halacha is based on the Gemara statements that bring Mishnahs, Brisas, and other statements, and then it's expounded upon and explained by the commentaries of the Gemara, and then after that you have halacha. They have the final
Ruling.
Yes. Okay, so the next Gemara talks about Reach Ra Sheyesh Lo Ikr. This would be there is dirt that has a source. So, for example, this would be an example of changing a child's diaper. So this David's example would apply. It's Reach Ra, has a bad smell. Sheyesh Lo Ikr, that has a source. So the thing is that you are standing, not facing it, your back is to it, and therefore, the only real issue is that there's two issues here. Number one is you are in close proximity to the schmutz, to the excrement, and number two, there's a bad smell. So the only good thing is that you're not facing it. So the halacha is Rav Huna. So here we have two opinions. Rav Huna says marchek arba amos. You have to separate arba amos, 4 amos, from the source, meaning from the excrement. So you got to go 6 to 8 feet away from the diaper. There's a dirty diaper. You go 6 to 8 feet away. You can now say Shema. Now, the thing is that what about if the smell is still there? So you're 6 to 8 feet away, but there is a smell. So,
Rabbi, don't you have a responsibility to change the diaper before you start to say the prayers?
yeah, no, but I'm talking about a case where there's a diaper on the floor that was changed,
Oh,
and
okay,
the child is nice and clean, and
okay.
you're taking very good care of the child, but your
Okay.
house maybe could use a cleaning lady, and you
Okay.
left the diaper on the floor, and there's no one there who's picking it up. And it could be also talking about where you didn't you might have didn't know the halacha, and you were too tired, and and you couldn't, you wanted to. So anyway, so the fact is that you said Shema, and or what should you do if you're feeling tired? Do you have to get up and get it out, or can you just say Shema where you are? You're feeling weak and pain. Yes, Ben.
I don't see that it says diaper. It just says there is a source for the smell. So the source can be anything.
You are correct. I was just giving an example.
It can be on the person, it can be on the floor, it can be something that wasn't cleaned up. There's a source for the smell.
Right. It does have to be a bad smell. It can't just
Right.
be a smell of,
Right.
some spice that you don't enjoy.
No, it's a bathroom smell.
Reach ra, it's a bad smell. But yeah, I was just giving an example.
Right,
Maybe.
right. But people
And-
focus on a diaper, and a diaper is a different story than, a source of bad smell.
Well, we hope that you don't have other bad smells, and the only bad smell should be
They
from a
used
diaper.
to, yeah, they probably used to. If they didn't have water in the bathroom, they probably had other sources.
So here we have Reach Rashi Yesh Liyata. So Rav Huna says you have to go separate Marchik Arba Amos. You separate 4 amos from the source. Now, what happens if it still smells where you are? So again, you're on the couch, and the diaper is on the floor 6 to 8 feet away, but it still smells. So you're far away from the diaper, but it still smells. So Rashi here says that it doesn't matter. Even though there's a smell, the fact is you are outside of the camp of that dirt. In other words, according to Jewish law, Dalet Amos, 4 amos is sort of like your camp. 4 amos is your camp, and is your area. And if you're outside of, okay, I'm just going to mute everyone here. Just do that. But if you're out of 4 amos of that area, so it doesn't matter, according to Rav Huna, if there is a smell.
Rabbi?
And now this is Rashi's opinion. The Rambam says that we're assuming that, you're going 4 amos away. We're assuming that there is no smell. Assuming that there's no smell at this distance, then you're fine. You do not have to walk 4 amos from the smell, from where the smell ends. You just have to separate 4 amos from the source of the smell. So let's say the smell reaches to a foot away from where you're resting. So if you go a foot closer to the dirty diaper, you will smell it. So do you need to separate 4 amos away from the smell or away from the source? And the way the Rambam learns is you have to separate away from the source 4 amos, but on the condition that there's no smell. Assuming there's no smell, as long as you separated 4 amos away from the source, even though from the smell you're only 1 amma away, but as long as you're away 4 amos from the source, that's fine. So that's the 2 ways of learning this Gemara. Again, where Rashi's shot is even if there is a bad smell, and according to Rav Huna, that's okay. And the Rambam would learn that, as long as the smell isn't there, that would be the understanding that you separate 4 amos from the source of the smell. Now, Rav Chizda argues, and Rav Chizda is going to be more strict, and he says you have to separate 4 amos from where the smell ends. So that's the more strict view. Okay, now Moshe, you had a question.
Yes, Rabbi. What about in the Machane, in the if you're away from, let's say there's a minoval not too far away in a Beit Knesset and everybody's praying. What's the how does that apply? If you have, let's say, a rat that's decomposing in a corner, or near the the bima, what do you do then? I mean, it could be underneath, and they don't know exactly where it's at. I mean, how does that apply? How many amot do you have to be away from that?
Yeah, so this is the thing. There is an argument regarding something that's covered, if that is considered a bad smell that has a source, or a bad smell that doesn't have a source. In other words, does the covering help? Now, if the covering of it helps, then it's now considered just a bad smell that doesn't have a source. So then, we're going to see in the next Gemara a halacha about that a bad smell that doesn't have a source. So there might be room for a leniency that could be considered a bad smell that doesn't have a source. So because it's covered, because generally the rats die in the wall of the house, and therefore they die in the wall, and it's impossible to remove it, and you're stuck with that smell. But it could last up to like 3 weeks. But the thing is that it is covered. So there might be room for leniency. Again, we're going to see the Gemara, the next piece of Gemara for that. But that would be a reason for leniency. Now, according to the other opinion, it doesn't help. It doesn't help if it's covered. It's still considered a bad smell that has a source, and you would need to separate 4 amas, 6 to 8 feet from the source, and even though the smell is still there. So that would be again, this is Rav Huna's opinion. And then Rav Chizda's opinion is that you need to separate 4 amas from where the smell ends. So depending on who the halacha goes like, and depending on who, but that's this is where it ties into this Gemara and the next Gemara. Okay, so let's continue. So we have these 2 opinions. Rav Chizda Amar, Rav Chizda says, Marchik arba amis mimakim shepasak hareach v'koirei kriyashma. He's more strict. So again, we have these arguments of Rav Huna and Rav Chizda. We've now found this is the third argument. Rav Huna and Rav Chizda. Rav Huna is more lenient, and Rav Chizda is more strict. And Rav Chizda says you have to separate 4 amas from where the smell ends. Okay. Now,
Rabbi, I need to interrupt, but you're not supposed to, if the smell is coming from a person,
no,
you're not supposed to move away from them, are they? If you're in a temple, you're not supposed to embarrass them, are you?
Well, you're never allowed to embarrass someone. But
Okay,
that doesn't mean that you should daven. Maybe you should wait. You know,
Alright.
so that's really, well, let's continue on the next two Gemaras. Let's
Alright.
continue on the next few Gemaras. And hopefully by the end of the week, we'll have answers to some of our halachic questions in this area. But at least what we're getting to is the source of the halachas are right here. Tanya Kavasei de Rav Chizda. We have a brisa that follows Rav Chizda. What does the brisa say? So this is a statement of the earlier of the Tanoim, a brisa, and follows what Rav Chizda, who Rav Chizda was one of the Amoraim in the third generation of Amoraim. Rav Chizda, Rav Huna was the second generation Amora. So this is a brisa that seems to follow Rav Chizda's way of thinking, which means Rav Chizda follows the brisa's way of understanding it. So lo yikra adam kriya shema. Person should not recite Shema. Lo keneged tzayas adam, not opposite the excrement of a person. Lo keneged tzayas klavim, not opposite the excrement of dogs. Lo keneged tzayas chazerim, not keneged the excrement of pigs. Lo keneged tzayas tarnagolim, not opposite the excrement of tarnagolim, of chickens. Lo keneged tzayas ashpa, not opposite the shmutz that's they would empty their excrement into a certain garbage dump. So you shouldn't daven opposite that garbage dump that has a bad smell. But if you are 10 tfachim high in a place that's 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, it has to be 4 by 4, 4 hand breaths by 4 hand breaths, and 10 tfachim high. Well, hand breath is about 3 or 4 inches. So if you are on a platform above this dirt, or you're in a lower area that's below this dirt, so you're makam gavaya asar tfachim, either 10 tfachim higher than it, or namach asar tfachim, or 10 tfachim lower than it. Yoishev betzida, you could be sitting next to it, near it. You know, just that you're at a distance because you're higher or lower, but you're within 4 amas, and v'kari kriyashma, and you could recite the Shema. But in general, you're not allowed to be next to this dirt. However, if you are on a platform, so you're considered in a rishus liatzma, you're in your own domain, and therefore you would be allowed to say the Shema if you're in your own domain. Now, v'im lav, and if the or if the dirt is in its own domain, that's really if the dirt is higher than 10 tfachim or lower than 10 tfachim, that would be considered it's in its own domain, and you are not obligated to leave. Marchik v'im lav, but if it's not in its own domain, marchik malei einav, you have to go the amount of distance till you can't see it. You would need to leave the distance till you can't see it. Or of course you could turn around and make sure to go out of the Dalet Amos, and then recite the Shema v'chein l'tefillah. The same thing would apply to tefillah, that you're not allowed to daven in a opposite dirt. And reach ra sheyesh la'yikar marchik arba amos mimakom hareach. If there's a bad smell, you should go 4 amos from the place that the smell is. Mimakam hareach. In other words, there's the smell that's near you. You have to separate 4 amos from the reach, from the smell, the kairei kriya shema, and recite Shema. So who does this go like? Rav Huna or Rav Chizda? This goes like Rav Chizda. Because Rav Chizda says you got to separate 4 amos from the smell. Rav Huna said you just separate 4 amos from the source of the smell. Amar Rava says, Leis Hilchasa, the halacha is not ki hamasnisa in it, like this brisa. Now, what this means is not that it's totally wrong, but there's a small qualification that needs to be added to it. And it's regarding the excrement of a person. I'm sorry. It's regarding the excrement of dogs and chazirim and pigs. Now, that would be the exception. In other words, everything else seems fine with the brisa, but there is one issue with it, with these 2 areas, these 2 things. Why? Because he says that rather the halacha follows a different brisa. Elaki hadatanya, rather it's like this other brisa that says la yikra adam priyashma, person should not recite shema like keneged sayas adam, like keneged sayas chazirim. A person shouldn't say shema next to the excrement of a man, of chazer, a pig, and like keneged sayas klavim, and not opposite the excrement of dogs. Bizman shenasan oiros l'seichan, at the time that they placed leather in them in order to work, the leather, when they take the hide and make it
For
into
tanning.
leather.
For
The
tanning.
process. Thank you. So in that process, what they use is the excrement of dogs and of pigs. And in order to, it smells. It smells terribly, and that's really the problem. But the other so in other words, with regard to the excrement of a dog and a pig, it's not considered a problem unless it's in the tanning. They're using it for tanning purposes, and it smells. Otherwise, it's not an issue. Taisus over here deals with what about a tarnagoyim, if it's that it could be an issue that when we're talking about the dirt from tarnagoyim, from chickens, we're dealing with when they're in their coop. That's where it really smells. When they're in the house, well, when they're just roaming around, their excrement is not considered a problem.
It smells like a corpse. And you can't even get near it because it's there.
In the Yerushalmi, he brings that the red ones you have to be worried about. Maybe that the excrement of theirs smells a lot. Okay, so that's the law that Rava says that this is the laws of Shema and Shemon Esrei davening, how you have to be in a clean place, and these would be issues with that, would be problems. And but he does mention this. It does mention this idea of if the dirt is in a place that's high up or low, and the same thing would apply if the person is. The Mishnah Brura adds that if the person is high or low, or if the excrement is high or low, it basically has the same law, and that would be an exemption to this law.
They have a question. What the hell? The whole thing went on.
Now, just to clarify, because it is a little complicated. So what are we dealing with over here? This brisa, does it smell or doesn't it smell? So the brisa said that reach rashi yesh lo yikar, you have to separate 4 amos from the place. So when we're talking about if someone's high up or low, or if the excrement is high up or low, how are they going to be able to say Shema? Don't you need to separate from the smell? And that's it. That's what it says at the end. So the Rambam learns that that we're talking about that it doesn't smell, but you are in close proximity to it. The Talmidei Rabbeinu Yoina learn that they bring from the Chachmei Tzarfas, from the scholars of France, that even if there's a smell, the fact is this is considered a different domain. This is a different domain, being so high up or so low that it actually would be permissible. And that's a little surprising because Rav Chizda, this is following the logic of Rav Chizda, and yet it gives this exemption of, normally you need to separate 4 amos from the reya, from the smell. And here they're mentioning that it would be allowed, even though the smell is there, it would be allowed because you're really considered like you're in your own domain.
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
I had a question.
1 second. Ben had a question, I think, before.
Okay.
Ben, yes. Ben?
Yeah, I have 2 actually. One is 10 tfachim up or down. That means that it would be either on the roof or in the basement.
Okay,
In a
10
period
tefachim
when
would
they-
be like
in a
36
period when they
inches. 30.
didn't have a basement. So, but anyhow,
No,
They had more basements than we do. They would dig a hole in the ground.
oh,
We
yeah.
don't know how to hold a shovel. They would
Yeah,
dig.
the
They
other
would dig
thing-
holes in the ground.
Yeah, the other
That's
thing
right.
is people that don't have pajamas or money
Yeah.
for pajamas don't have money for diapers either. The babies were running around without any diapers, as far as I remember. But
I remember.
but
As far as he
but I
remembers.
don't understand what Rabbi Rabba is
Did you hear what
talking
I said?
about.
Uh-huh.
So when you get to it, I'd like
You don't understand what who's talking about? Rava?
Rabba, yeah.
Yeah, Rava's saying that even though we said you can't daven opposite the excrement of dogs and of pigs, but Rava says that really it's only a certain type of excrement when they put the leather into it.
Oh. So when they put the leather into it, you can or cannot daven.
You cannot, because
Oh,
that really,
cannot.
that's what
Okay.
really
Okay.
smells.
Very bad smell.
All right, I didn't
Okay.
get that. Thank
Now
you.
the next Gemara is Reach Ra She'ein Lo Yid.
David
Now-
wanted to ask something.
Yeah, I'm sorry, right. David, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the commentaries. Besides tanning, how is it practical that a Jewish home is raising a pig? Like, what's a pig doing around in a Jewish home or Jewish neighborhood? Other than tanning, there's halachas about not owning a pig. So, like, to give an example from any animal besides a dog, which might be more common because people use it for protection, how did this pig get in there? Any other commentaries mention, like, why a pig?
I didn't see anything. I mean, when it comes to halacha, you sometimes have to deal with scenarios that, that aren't necessarily, should not have happened, but the fact is that's the situation. You know what I mean? Like, we have to deal with certain scenarios. Why did it happen this way? What is someone doing with a pig? He wasn't supposed to, but he does. He owned the pig. Now, I'm not so familiar with the laws of, but there might be. I'm not so familiar with the laws of owning pigs. I don't know. I know there's a prohibition of doing business with basar v'chalab, or even pigs. I think you're not allowed to do a business if that's your main business with. Yeah, possibly. I believe.
If a neighbor asks you to
Inter-
watch his
But
pig, maybe.
Just one second. So there are laws about what businesses a person can do. Now you're mentioning laws about owning pigs. I guess, what did you learn it in Rambam? Where do you remember that?
I'm mentioning in terms of like there's 100 other animals that are more practical that could be hanging around: a dog, a cow, a horse, a donkey. There's like 100 other animals. Why? How did this pig get in there?
But I'm saying why shouldn't it? Why shouldn't it you own a pig?
I'm almost sure that it's in halacha that you're not allowed to own a pig. You're not allowed to do business with a pig. You're not allowed to. And like, how did this pig get in there? If you're giving examples, there's 100 other more common and normal animals. The least common, I would think, would be to own a pig. That's like right up there with owning a dinosaur.
So you're not asking halachically, you're asking from a practical perspective. Why did it pick that example? Oh, okay.
They're talking about wild boars in the forest. Maybe they're not talking about pigs.
Okay, Susan has a good answer, David, that it could be talking about
says if a pig is coming out of a river or a boar, a wild boar, is out of a river. I mean, I could understand that. I mean,
practice. So you're saying it is practical. Okay, thank you, Susan. Yeah,
yes, good point. Not in the city, obviously, or in the farm, but where you hunt.
In a hike.
Yeah, you can come in contact with a pig or a wild boar. Yes.
Right. Okay. Good. Yes, Ruben.
Years ago, they used to for binding for Gemaras, they used pigskin. So it was extremely practical to have pigs around because it was a very durable binding that they used. It's not done today, but years ago it was.
Making footballs.
Right.
No, because they don't want to
So I think that answers David's question.
Okay. So anyway, we're going to continue with the next Gemara then. If we can, I'd like to try to keep moving. Bo Minemer of Sheshas, the yeshiva boys. Yes, Phyllis.
My micro.
Okay. Bo Minemer of Sheshas, Reach Rash Ein La Yikr.
Hello, Rabbi.
Yeah.
With regard to the question that Susan asked earlier, I had a little confusion also because I always thought that the Baraisa was a position that was held more directly.
Phyllis, I'm not going to talk about it now.
From the Torah.
Thank you. We're not going to talk about it now. We have very short amount of time left. I must continue. But I'm happy to talk to you about it after. The Bnei Yeshiva, the Yeshiva asked a question from Rav Sheshas, the great Rabbi Rav Sheshas. They asked a question. What happens in the opposite case? If there is a smell, but there's no source for it. And this is a case of if a person passes gas, because there's no source, it's considered a bad smell, and there's no source. So what is the din? Mahu, what is the din? Amar lahu. So Rav Sheshas told them, Asu chazu, come and see hani tzipe, those mats, devei Rav in the base medrash of Rav, that the hani ganu, that they would sit on them, and people would sit on them, and some would sleep on them, and Vahani Garsi, and some would learn on them. And during a sleep, very possible that a person would pass gas, and obviously it's not a problem. They're learning Torah, and we see that this is common day occurrences. People are some are sleeping, some are learning, and it's not a problem. But he says, "Bahani mili l'divrei Torah." This applies to learning Torah. Aval b'kriyah Shema, but regarding Shema, see, because regarding Torah, you can't leave the base medrash. So it would be bittul Torah. But regarding Shema, it would be prohibited. Loy says no, you wouldn't be allowed to because it's not allowed. Regarding Shema, the divrei Torah nami, and even for learning Torah, loy amran ela dechavrei. It only applied to a person's friend, meaning only someone else. But Abel Didei, but his own, it would be loy, it would be prohibited to continue learning. You would have to wait until the smell goes away. Now there is another opinion that it means you wait until the actual you stop passing gas. In other words, is it the smell or is it the actual passing gas? So there's two opinions, but Rashi learns that it's the smell. You wait until the smell goes away, and that's the opinion of that's regarding that. This is the opinion of Rav Sheshis. Now, this is a little problematic because the earlier Gemara said that Rav Huna, Rashi learned, Rav Huna said that when you have a reach Rashi yesh lo yikar, when you have the source, Rav Huna said that you separate 4 amos, even if the smell is still there, as long as you separated 4 amos, you're sort of in a different, it's not considered your camp, and even though there's a bad smell, it's no problem. And here, Rav Sheshis is saying that regarding Shema, you're not allowed to say Shema if there's a reach ra she'ein lo yikar. So why is this different? In other words, why over here are we saying it's prohibited, and there we permitted it, even though there you actually have a source for the smell? And so the understanding is that Rav Sheshis here is going according to Rav Chizda, and it's really Rav Sheshis holds like Rav Chizda, and therefore there's a problem with smell. Rav Huna doesn't hold there's a problem with smell. Rav Huna holds the problem is if there's where there's something dirty or not dirty, but he doesn't hold there's a problem with smell. So this follows Rav Huna. This follows Rav Chizda, and Rav Huna is a different opinion, and he holds there's no problem with smell. Now that fits Rashi. This question fits with Rashi. With the Rambam, it's not an issue because the Rambam held that Rav Huna is talking about where there's no smell over there. So here we're talking about where there's a smell. So the Rambam is not a problem. The problem was with Rashi. Rashi said something that was surprising before, that Rav Huna has no issue with smell. How does he fit with this Gemara? And now we've answered it because Rav Sheshis doesn't fit with Rav Huna. Rav Huna is a lenient view, and Rav Sheshis doesn't follow that. Okay, we're going to stop here and call it a day.
Can I end with a story?
Rabbi?
Since we're on the subject?
Yes.
I want to start with a story and end with a story that applies to this particular Gemara. There's a famous story of Rabbi Elimelech and his brother Rav Zusha that were both being held in a prison. And they're both in the cell, and they're getting ready to daven or whatever, and the guard figures he's going to make it worse for them, so he shoves in the bucket that they use for excrement. They pass the bucket around. And now Rav Elimelech is all upset because they can't daven, because it stinks and it smells, and the chamber pot is right there. And Rav Zusha says it's not a problem, because the same way Hashem commanded us to daven, and we have it b'simcha, now Hashem gave us a situation where he commands us not to daven. And we should do that b'simcha. It's a mitzvah not to daven. So they both started singing and dancing around the chamber pot that it's a mitzvah not to daven. The guard sees this and goes, what are these Jews so happy about? The chamber pot? And he goes in to take out the chamber pot so they shouldn't be dancing. So they will both be able to daven.
Oh yes, yes, that's a great story.
That's really good.
Beautiful. Zygosint,
Great
everybody.
story.
Stay
Yes,
safe.
yes. Okay,
Like-
Phyllis, you had a question about the brisa. What was your question? Felice? You're muted. Okay.
How about now?
Yeah. Okay, now I hear you.
Okay. I love the story, but pertaining to Susan's question, I thought Baraisa had a stronger position based on Torah with regard to what the halacha finally is, as opposed to what they call the Rabbanan, which is a rabbinic decision that's more of an extrapolation. I guess I'm wrong. Am I wrong?
It has nothing to do with rabbinic or biblical. A brisa sometimes explains biblical laws, sometimes explains rabbinic laws. It could talk about both. It could talk about, customs. I mean, a brisa is a statement of the rabbis that they wrote or that they discussed, and it's written down. And it often says a few opinions. Sometimes in a brisa you'll have two opinions. So it doesn't necessarily have anything specifically to do with biblical laws or rabbinic laws.
Rebbe,
So it's more like Robert said, an analysis?
Just one
Rebbe,
second.
isn't it true that a brisa is just the Mishnah that was not included by Rav Yehuda Hanassi in the Mishnah? It's the same statements by the same rabbis of that time. These are very serious Tanaic statements. Rav Yehuda Hanassi, for whatever reason, didn't include it in the book.
Right.
So these are like separate Mishnahs that were never included in the Mishnah by Rav Yehuda Hanassi. Yet they were still quoted by the later rabbis. It wasn't in the Mishnah, but it still had a lot of authority. It certainly superseded anything they were doing, and that's why they use it as an argument. So it's like one level lower than a Mishnah.
Right.
If a Mishnah said something different, the Mishnah applies. Then the Brisa would have very heavy weight. And then the Gemara rabbis talk about themselves, what they use, what they don't use, things like that.
That's a good way of explaining it. I often just say that the brisa was unedited by Rebbe. Rebbe edited the Mishnahs and made them exactly precise, and the brisas were not as edited. They were like less edited because Rebbe didn't edit
Include
it.
them.
Yeah, it didn't include it in
I
the
really appreciate this, Lisa.
Okay.
Thank you so
Sure,
much.
sure. Okay, very good. Everyone have a
Thank you
wonderful
so much.
day.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Sei gesund. See you later.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Go to.
All too.